Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was able to get I'm talking about your invoice, so that so it'll get paid by Friday of this month. I know, I was surprised too. Both. Yeah.
Okay, we need to continue our conversation on basketball.
Yeah, he has great stuff.
I mentioned it to our
I always have.
meeting we're doing.
He got your man.
She had it almost right down the middle, didn't she?
She did. Right.
Which
May 15th meeting of the Reparations Commission for the City of Asheville, Buncombe County, also known as the Community Reparations Commission. I'd like to convene in that. We're going to do a little subbing initially as our people come in, but I do have just a couple of remarks. One is this. Just a couple of hours ago, the announcement was made of who the new superintendent for the Asheville City Schools will be. His name is Dr. Rick Cruz. He's out of Houston, Texas. He was the deputy superintendent there. I was invited to the reception, but I just couldn't do that and be here at the same time. And so as we're talking about education, I thought it might be appropriate just to jot his name down and maybe make an appointment or two to discuss some of our concerns that we've discussed. He's going to be a central part of it. The connections between reparations and education are not as clear as the connections that city and county government might have with our other IFAs. The Buncombe County schools, Asheville City schools, answer directly to the state. They don't answer to city council or county commission. You see? And so having relationships with the superintendent early on might be pivotal. The second announcement I'd like to make is this. As I said before in our previous meeting, or last meeting, we're at this halfway point. We're getting information regarding the time for a retreat. But let me say to you that the reparations, and I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, reparations movements, as many other movements, including civil rights movements, are often not destroyed because of attacks from outside. They often implode because of tensions inside. And so as we move into this critical work, please keep it in front of you that this work is for our various communities. We're healing something we're doing something that has not been done before. Be patient with each other. That's all I'm suggesting. Be patient with each other. Now, we can move on to the roll call. Christine, would you do that for me, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Mullen. Good evening, everyone. I hope y'all are doing well. Welcome to another beautiful week. I'm Christine Edwards. I'm the CRC project manager. I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call. Starting with Dwayne Barton, Norma Baines,
Here.
Renata Conyers, Renetta Copeland,
Here.
Christopher Gordon,
Here.
Roy Harris, Joyce Harrison, Shonda Jackson, Kimberly Jones, Dewana Little, Dwayne McAfee,
Here.
Tamari Macon,
Here.
Babette Mays,
Present.
Glenda McDowell,
Here.
Tamara Miller, Dwight Mullen,
Present.
Mildred Nance Carson, Bernard Oliphant,
Present.
Thomas Priester, Jesse Ray, Dwayne Richardson,
Here.
Eric Robinson,
Here.
Renita Waters, Cece Weston,
Here.
D. Williams,
Here.
MZ Yehuda,
Here.
Keith Young,
Here.
D. Burris, Tiffany Debolo, Shakiki Giles Baton, Osandu McPeters. All right, and thank you. As folks join us, I'll be sure to mark them present on the roll as well. We do have a quorum.
And so we shall proceed with entertaining a motion for acceptance of the action item or approval of the agenda and meeting minutes. Is there such a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there comments? Corrections? Not? All those in favor? Aye. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Voice carries it. Thank you. Item 4 is a review of our meeting survey data from the April 24th meeting.
Okay, thank you. So you all should have received a copy of the agenda with a link to the survey data. I'm not going to go over it in extreme detail, but I will say that response to the question, did you have the opportunity to express your ideas, thoughts, and opinions at the April 24th meeting? Everybody responded yes. We got no responses to that question. I think that might be the first time that we got a fully 100% people responding yes, they got an opportunity to express their ideas at the meeting. A couple of things, what people liked most about the April 24th meeting, a couple of people mentioned the IFA updates and appreciating hearing from IFA members, the sharing of recommendations by the IFA, and having open face-to-face communication. Some of the things that needed improvement, the agenda was packed full. Someone commented that it felt rushed. There's some really detailed comments here that I invite y'all to read. Yeah, and something about the retreat, people commenting on the retreat as well and wanting more information about that. So nothing really stood out, but I do encourage y'all to make sure that you're reading these comments so that everybody can get their thoughts and opinions in the room. And that's pretty much it. I also have an updated version of the agenda so that y'all can receive all of these new updated documents that you have here printed in your packet. But what I'm going to do after the meeting is make sure y'all get a digital copy of those documents as well. All right. So, well, I was going to go right into our first IFA update. With that said, so we're actually going to hear from health and wellness tonight and education. And we're first going to hear from the health and wellness IFA facilitator and spokespersons. Again, y'all will have, the IFA will have 15 minutes to go over their presentation. I'm going to be facilitating with a 2-minute warning with this card and then letting you know your time is up with this card. I think we should be good on time. We usually do pretty good with that. And then I also have these comment cards. If you don't want to have your comment in the room, or you want to submit something anonymously, or you want to make sure that it gets put on the record, make sure you write your comment card down, and we do keep these on the record. All right, take it away, Ms. Dion.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're excited Health and Wellness here today. We have also Tamari and Ms. Norma. And we wanted to kind of give you some updates as to where we are with health and wellness. We're excited about the progress and wanted to also, though, say, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that we're very extremely grateful for some of the assistance that we've had around data requests. Dr. Armstrong has been just instrumental in helping us kind of hone in on some specifics so that the data research team with the county has what they need to make sure that they can help us fulfill some of these requests. And Ginger has been fabulous. So again, thank you so much for supporting health and wellness as we are looking to address some of our historic, we can say, data requests. So we wanted to share a couple of things. Oops. We wanted to share, again, that we're still meeting at Stevens Lee. We welcome any of the commissioners to come to our meetings at 5:30. The time changed a little bit simply because it was nice to be able to linger a little while afterwards. We can meet longer. But what you'll also know is that what we decided to do from the recommendations tonight overview is take a category, because we had multiple categories you would see in your notes. We had different categories of the recommendations, and tonight's category that we're looking at is in general stopping and decreasing harms. We did notice as you go through this that we are overlapping, and we'll talk a little more about that. We're excited to potentially be meeting with education and other IFAs in order for us to connect, because many of us are not operating in silos within the space. And we can talk more about that in a few minutes. But we also, how are we gaining community buy-in? We're looking at we're looking forward to having additional community sessions in partnership with RJC and other entities that have really helped us get the word out. We have an announcement about another engagement opportunity that Ms. Baines will help us with in a little bit. But again, we're excited about how we can, based upon your recommendations to us, how we can make sure that we have opportunities for the public to weigh in to what we're doing and to guide this work. So within the categories here, we looked at a rubric where in the past we've looked at timing, and we know that this has kind of transitioned a little bit. We went from time stamping things in the past to priorities. But again, one of the focus questions that we talked about is where would we want health and wellness to be in the next 3 years or the next 3 to 5 years. And so you saw the time frames where we were talking about an intermediate schedule, short-term, intermediate, immediate, and long-term. But that has altered a little bit as we're looking at priority. But to see this particular recommendation, stopping harms in county and city healthcare services, processes, and policies, again, that was considered by the entire Health and Wellness Committee to be a critical, a priority recommendation. And so with that being the case, what can we get copies of guidelines, historic guidelines? Were there audits that we could get access to, or was there the possibility of us having audits around some of these guidelines and recommendations? And again, were there any restrictions around city and county benefits for us to be able to kind of get a historic look at what had happened in the past critically, and then how we move forward with this? You'll see over on the right, again, how this kind of came out with the process where we were trying to figure out organically what was the most important, and then how those topics kind of, I guess organic is again the phrase, kind of guided themselves into being clustered in categories that were similar to each other. So you see that's the representation of the screens and the pages and all of this documentation that the group has had this great work around. So when we talk about decreasing barriers to those previously incarcerated, another part of this category in particular, then after incarceration, again, intersection with criminal justice, what would people be eligible for or ineligible for current rules and regulations? And we know that particularly from the work that criminal justice has been doing, there's some restrictions that people who've been formerly incarcerated, even if they've done their time, have been subject to. Again, this is crossing health and wellness. So additional research in this category in particular, what the recommendation would call for additional research. Can we see what existing programs are already here? And again, this is again us connecting to criminal justice. What's already in place here in Buncombe County, how we can move forward to see if those recommendations or those programs and services are currently being executed as we would like them to be. What's the status of all of those? And then another, as we are also trying to make sure that not only are we working with the data team with the county and others, and we understand that a librarian will be coming on soon to help with some of these data requests as well. We're also doing our own research. So some of that, again, the community health assessment is amazing. The fact that we are also looking at what, to read it from cover to cover, we haven't done that yet. But we will be getting copies of that from a previous year, the last year of the assessment, to see if some of our additional questions can be answered. And again, you'll see here about just from the North Carolina, Western North Carolina Health Network, another entity in the region that particularly gathers data around some of our questions, and for the entire region, including Buncombe County, would be able to help give those data requests a new meaning, because we're still, and Dr. Bacon will talk about that, we're still really looking at that, but I understand we're going to maybe talk a little more about data requests a little later tonight. in some of our additional research, you'll see here a couple of interesting things here. And this is based upon some of the recommendations that you all have also talked to Health and Wellness about. When we talk about the racism around environmental issues, that was a great article that was coming to us that we're going to be doing again, collecting additional articles around some of our questions. And then this one in particular, the process around, again, housing. And when individuals through all kinds of unfortunate issues were removed from their homes, the fact that on a national level, public health departments were entrusted with making sure that individuals had access to healthy housing. That did not always happen. So again, being able to do this kind of research to read in to where things were dropped, particularly around health and wellness issues on a national level, a state level, that's critical in that individuals and communities that were told that they would be moved or have other options in housing when gentrification and a lot happened, did not always have access to be able to get into safe housing. That's a housing issue that also affects health and wellness. So we're going to continue. We're not going to allow, I know all of us are really involved with the data requests, but we're not going to allow that to stop health and wellness as we want to continue trying to find additional pieces of information that would support the recommendations that we have, that we're prepared to show you, all of y'all. Would you like to talk about an opportunity for community engagement?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
As you know, community engagement is very important. If you want to get it right, come to the community right. So the Shiloh Community Association will be hosting Storytelling Day, and it will be at the Linwood Crump Shiloh Recreation Center. We will be honoring residents in our community that is 90 and over. So this is something to see and really to listen to the stories that have happened in their lives. So we're inviting all of you to come, and the Health and Wellness Commissioners will be there, and we hope you will come too. That is Saturday, May the 20th, 2023, from 1 to 4 at the Linwood Crump Shiloh Recreation Center. Thank you.
So we hope to see many of you all there. We're excited about another, again, community engagement opportunity. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Macon to come up and talk a little more about how we're approaching data requests and kind of just, well, she's brilliant and is working with a lot of data requests herself. So just to give you an update of kind of where we are, how we're using our time together to look at data requests.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So as you know, we have submitted several data requests, and I saw in our packets that we have a list of completed data requests across all IFAs, as well as some priority requests, and there are several from Health and Wellness. There were some snafus in the logistics earlier on, but now we have the request submitted and officially received, and so we're hopeful to get more information to support our recommendations to name the harms historically and currently by city and county governments to support our proposals. What else would I like to say? Well, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but I think this applies to all the IFAs as well. Looking at the template we have for developing recommendations, there's a question in there that asks something along the lines of what data are needed to support this proposal, and so want us to continue to press forward and making sure we have what we need for really strong proposals and recommendations that will be approved. Thank you.
We wanted to take a little bit of time at the end of this, and I'm sorry, Christine, I don't mean to be jumping ahead of it, but do we have any additional questions? Yes.
Remember, for your questions, please identify for the live stream that's going on. They can't see necessarily who we are. I'm Dwight Mullen.
for any of you, I don't know if this matters, but I wonder if you contacted the accreditation agencies for healthcare providers, and maybe they could also provide data because the agencies report to them.
That will have to be a part of our request, because what we know is that locally at the state and the national level, there are different levels of accreditation. And so we need to really be able to do that kind of digging. It's beyond just the local resources and research. So yes, that's something that we're talking about. What are the local governing bodies that would have affected healthcare policy? What are the state levels? When we talk about multiple things that have happened around healthcare systems, and particularly whether or not Buncombe County was even more stringent than some of the state accreditation agencies or accountability agencies. Are there accountability agencies that we need to talk to that have looked at healthcare agencies as far as housing or assisted living facilities, or whether or not African Americans had access to those facilities? So we've got a whole nother subset of questions around who were the accountability partners in some of the healthcare agencies, because we haven't found a lot today. So that's some of our extended research questions that we want to try to determine.
I'm suggesting it because HCA owns Mission.
Yes.
And as a private entity, getting data is difficult. But they must report to accreditation agencies.
Correct. And there's a health policy initiative that's out of UNC Asheville that also deals with some of these policy issues and intersections of that with HCA and Mission. So I have a long list of questions, and I'm trying to use some alternate routes to get the answers to those. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
Yeah, good evening. I'm just curious as to whether the yearly report that comes through the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services for Buncombe County, do we still show the highest mortality and morbidity rates among African Americans?
From what I understand, yes.
Yeah, and than any other place in the state. So it's just frightening. This information to me is absolutely frightening. And you usually don't see it. You usually don't see it. So.
And unfortunately, African American women are still showing the highest morbidity and mortality rates, including the fact it doesn't matter if African American women are more affluent. Unfortunately, the data is showing that if you're more affluent and African American, you still have higher mortality rates than poor white women. So we've got some issues to address. Yes.
Hi, Dwayne McAfee. I just want to follow up. We know some of the data, infant mortality. I'm a little curious as to what we're doing immediately. I understand data is coming in, but some of the information we already have just by being Black in America. We know the disparities exist. What is your IFA doing immediately to try to eliminate the disparities that are going on?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that, please.
What are you doing immediately to try to eliminate some of the disparities?
Well, again, immediately, some of our recommendations address the fact that exactly, do we have birthing, what happened to our birthing centers? What happened to organizations and departments within hospitals that did community outreach? What happened to, I had a conversation on Friday with the Health Policy Institute and several senators about why did we have such discrepancies and what happened to the closing of hospitals that used to address these inequities, particularly in communities of color. The answer was that they couldn't say anything. So there has not been a lot recently, immediately, to be done to address this. And so our thing is, if we talk about a time frame, then that's a critical need, that we need to be able to address this sooner than later. And you're right, it just seems like we're running into a lot of holes when it comes to answers, and some of it means that maybe enough is not being done.
Thank you for that question, and I think that, again, raises an issue that I'm curious about across IFAs, and I think we'll hear more from the education group. So I'm curious whether, knowing there's an existing inequity currently, is that sufficient harm to tie to a recommendation, or do we need further evidence or further connecting to specific instances by city and county government around initiating or perpetuating harm? And secondly, I wanted to say that some of our recommendations have to do with supporting some existing initiatives that are helping with or supporting to close the gaps in health. So one example that Ms. Norman mentioned is Sisters Caring for Sisters, which is a community-based doula program. And there are other examples of people who are working to close the Black-white infant mortality gap, for example.
Jesse Ray, does your scope of research data include long-term care facilities, information from long-term care facilities? The reason I'm bringing that up is that individuals based on social and economic positions go into long-term care facilities. They may go into those facilities with certain diseases and conditions, and how are they treated once they get into that system? My generalization is that once they get into those systems, those long-term care facilities, their health maintenance program is minimum, and that contributes to the decline of that person. And so that's the reason I'm asking that question, if it includes some research on or data for the long-term care facility.
Yes, that is very important, because once your loved one go into a nursing home, you should stay on top of it. You should be there visiting and making sure that medication that is given is the right medication. And I'm sure we're going to look into that, because all of us might have had someone in a nursing home, you know, sometime, or maybe later we would have one. I know my husband was in one for a while. And it was very important that I kept up with the medication he was on and how they were delivering that medication to him, because sometimes they will over-medicate or something like that, and you don't want that to happen, or the patient's given the wrong medication if they're not being followed properly.
Another part of that is for us to be able to look at Medicare, Medicaid, and we have wonderful partners that come to our meetings also when we're talking about how those benefits look for everyone, regardless of socioeconomic status. That is obviously a long-term recommendation when we talk about policy, but it's something that has been in our radar, because again, if you don't even have the benefits to be able to access the assisted living care or the long-term care, then you may not even be able to get into a facility that would be able to provide the care you need. So thank you for that reminder, but we are also looking into how on a local, state, and even national level, we know, unfortunately, again, with how some political things are happening in North Carolina, that Governor Cooper is kind of facing a battle when it comes to care, Medicaid, and Medicare expansion for individuals. So again, we're looking into how this would impact Buncombe County and those that are seeking and needing additional assistance in order to be able to afford going into a facility to address any kind of chronic health needs.
The last question, Ms. Babette?
No, it was answered. I'm good.
You okay?
Good.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Very good.
All right, and next we're going to hear from the Education IFA, and we're going to hear from their facilitator and spokesperson. So I invite y'all to come to the podium. You also they have the presentation up here, and there's also some supplemental information from the Education IFA that's been printed out, which includes 2 of their proposal templates. One has to do with Black teacher retention, and the other one has to do with student suspension. So all of those are also pulled up. So last thing I'll say is when you're ready to switch to the other document, you can just let the facility manager know and he'll switch it over and we can put it on the screen. Okay, Roland. I know. Get ready.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So education IFA, we continue to meet every other Tuesday. Next meeting is the 23rd of this month. Quick summary just for where we are. We continue to work on immediate short-term, not really long-term, but I guess immediate and short-term recommendations that we'll share today. We have 3 of them and then one future, I guess, long-term recommendation that we will share as well. Most of our recommendations are still in draft format, but they are essentially in a good space where we're looking for community feedback and commission feedback so that we can finalize and start to meet with other IFAs so that we can kind of get together to see where all of our recommendations and proposals correlate. So with that being said, if you have questions about what we share, we do look for feedback, but if you have your cards, we would like to collect those so that we can start to schedule visits with other IFAs starting this month, next month, so that we have a guideline for discussion of how our goals and recommendations kind of commits together. So with that being said,
Which one do you want to switch to?
let's go with the stop the harm.
Which one is that? Is that the letter?
No, that'll be last. It's the suspension.
Okay, thank you. So we're talking about,
Yes, and Mr. Gordon is going to discuss that.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
A couple of months ago, when we were talking about what we could do immediately to stop the harm in our school system, it became apparent that the issue of disproportionate suspensions and expulsions of our students in Asheville City and Buncombe County schools was a critical issue. It's something that we would like to get in front of the boards. And again, I think Dr. Mullen sort of said this earlier, that we are under the auspices of the school boards rather than the city or the county government. So we want to bring these to the school boards. Anyway, so we created a proposal. I'll go through some of the highlights here. Hopefully you can read it on your own. There are a number of footnotes and things like that.
just 1 second. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Just so y'all can follow along, the pages are not numbered, but it looks like this. It's got education on the top. It says stop the harm, and it's on the left side of your packet. It's printed on the back. It's on the left side. Thank you.
Health and wellness is on the back of mine. And
I'm gonna show you.
okay, come on. I'm a little slow. Come on.
All right, to continue. So we've come up with a number of recommendations. As you look through the packet, you'll see the way this is laid out. The harm addressed is on the 3rd page. There's a lot of data from Buncombe County and Asheville City schools as to the disproportionate rate of suspensions for black students. But I wanted to go through some of the recommendations so you guys had an idea of what we're trying to accomplish and hopefully could give us some feedback. So one of the first things is racial equity, social justice, cultural awareness training for all teachers and administrators. We firmly believe that all staff in the schools needs to be aware of our people and how to work with black students. The second one was behavior management, trauma-informed care training for all administrators and teachers. Again, most teachers don't have any training in behavior management. When they go through college courses, that's not one that they take. But we would like to see the county and the city provide some of that training for teachers so that they understand how to work with children. Establishment of a suspension review board. Again, this would be community and district stakeholders who would look over current policies and protocols and propose alternative school-based solutions that don't involve removing students from the classroom. Establishment of community-based advocates who would attend pre-suspension meetings as a parent or student representative, so that our parents, our students, have somebody who knows the laws, who understands the protocols in the room with them when these decisions are being made. Establishment of a day treatment program. Again, this addresses mental health, behavioral issues. So instead of suspensions, you have a program where kids are getting counseling half a day and academics half a day, which is what a day treatment program is. And there's a description of some of them later on in the proposal. We want to establish a tracking system for teacher referrals so that we know which teachers are referring students over and over and over again, and that can be addressed. We want to make strict guidelines for SRO interventions. We want to stop bringing criminal charges for adolescent behavior, and only allow involvement when imminent safety of students and staff is in question, so that police on campus are not policing on campus unless it's absolutely necessary. We want to establish a mechanism to ensure compliance with ISS and OSS tracking policy, making sure that school data is not skewed by lack of reporting. We want to educate parents, know your rights resources, share with parents and caregivers. Also develop child development and parenting support at every educational level. And then lastly, increase campus access to mental health professionals so that we have sufficient counselors and therapists to work with kids who are having problems, behavior problems. Again, the whole idea is to keep them in class, in school, not out of school. The rest of this packet you can see, like I said, there's a whole, the harm address section, community impact section. I'm not going to read over that. Obviously, it's a huge problem. Again, we want to get it before both the Asheville City Schools Board and the Buncombe County Board sometime in the next month or two. So we're looking for feedback on that. I think next, and we'll take questions afterwards. Next, there's another recommendation. It's called the Black Teacher Retention Promise. So if you'll turn to that page, I think Thomas presents.
Good evening, Thomas Priester. So with the Black Teacher Retention Promise, one of the recommendations, as you can see, a racially diverse and qualified educational workforce for our children. So we mostly talked about Black children, having someone to identify for as educators and even at the administration level, where we in both the Buncombe County and Asheville City districts. So we have the Black educator community, restoring that, and that looks as you can see, I'm not going to read it, but with the statistics showing Black students have just one Black teacher in elementary school are more likely to graduate and more likely to enroll in college. So that's just seeing someone that looks like us. It goes into every K-5 student graduate from elementary school having been taught by at least one Black teacher. It goes on to even go up to high school, where every 9th through 12th student graduates from high school having been taught by at least one Black teacher in a core subject such as math, English, or science. A vibrant and engaged Black educated community in both districts, and that looks as community building in school and outside of school, dedicated staff. Like I mentioned before, that's Black educator advocates and advisor at both levels of not just teaching, but as administration. This association will provide an advocacy channel for representation at school boards. Also, the restoration of neighborhood schools and educational communities. So having teachers and school staff who live within the communities which they serve has been evidence to support. We even spoke on with the Black teacher retention and recruitment at Peak Academy. I'm not sure if it was, I know they hired some staff. I think they have a few staff that are Jamaican. So we were just saying even like follow that pilot. And I think they started last year, I would volunteer there and they had like maybe 2, but I think maybe now they may be up to like 5 staff members. So even going that far as like reaching out to some of the educators like of the Jamaican countries and even outreach to the HBCUs is a good way to start with recruiting. Also, direct compensation of Black educators for the toll of integration. So lists that we know the integration of school communities brought great social and emotional stress upon Black youth and educators who experience racial heckling, school riots, microaggression, macroaggressions from white citizens. And they go further bullet points and details. The Black teacher recruitment and retention package, that would definitely focus on housing. So that will look like annual housing allowance for the teacher and spouse in our Tuesday meeting. So I'm just meaning even if your spouse is not of education, if Buncombe County, Asheville would have somewhat of a community hub to support the spouse, whether it's construction or whatever the other spouse profession may be. So the home ownership program, rebates for educators, monetary compensation, so that could look as an annual stipend to support further education and professional development, sign-in bonuses, annual retention bonuses. Also, recruitment strategies that align with seeking Black folks with interests aligned with the culture of Asheville. So you focus on the wellness and activities and natures of Black professionals. Building a Black teacher pipeline for future. So city and county district partner with area high school, colleges, and universities to develop and support a pool of Black teacher candidates for future employment. Establishing scholarship funds for Black high school graduates to major in education. And yeah, so that package, you can see at the bottom, addresses the harms of implementation of the Desegregation Act, which resulted in the loss of underemployment of Black teachers, the ramification of these decisions, coupled with underinvestment in education and retention of teachers. Any questions or anything to add?
I wanted to ask him, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then we have one more. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Cece Weston. You should find in your packet also a letter that was written to the Asheville City School Board. And it was written, of course, on behalf of the Education IFA, and some of the requests that we have for the school board. The first thing you'll see is that there was an outlining of problems, persistent problems that we had listed that have occurred throughout the history of the city school district. And that is the bullet points that you see, the devastatingly disproportionate suspension rate of Black students, the underrepresentation of African American teachers in the school system, the lack of high-quality universal preschool opportunities, the lack of curriculum, policy, and resource appropriations to engage and enrich African American students, the lack of resources to adequately address trauma and mental health issues among Black students, the lack of teachers who have been trained to engage with and educate a culturally diverse set of learners and respond to the systemic racism ingrained in our schools, the unwillingness of district leaders, school administrators, and teaching staff to accept shared responsibility for the consistent underperformance of Black students, the unwillingness of district leaders and school administrators to hold individual teachers accountable when Black students in their classes consistently underperform. So when this letter was sent to the school board, of course they did not have a superintendent. They had one that was interim, and it's our understanding that this is going to be passed to the superintendent, and they're going to allow us to meet with the superintendent to get answers for this, for the most part. So, is there anything else?
Hi everyone, Dr. Mary Slappin, I'm the facilitator for the education work group. So it was actually the work of this group to draft this letter and submit it to the school board as they were in the midst of their search for a superintendent. We wanted them to know and have their eyes on the recommendations that are forthcoming for them and to choose a superintendent that is aligned with the recommendations we will be passing forth to them. And if you don't know, they're voting on the new person tonight. He's already what happened tonight, didn't it? Okay, he was there. Well, it happened today. So anyway, in any case, what we wanted to do is ensure that there's communication between this group and that body that is ultimately responsible for forwarding any of the number of recommendations that we've shared with you all tonight. Now.
That letter will also be reworked and sent to the Buncombe County Board.
And then I think now I saw your timing to do questions.
Yep, we have 10 minutes for questions until we have to move to our next agenda item.
Other questions?
D. All right, D. Williams, a couple of questions. One is, these recommendations, have they been vetted by the attorneys? Because there are, of course, pardon?
Just a little bit more.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, have they been vetted by the city or county attorney? Because the educational system in North Carolina is bound by statutory requirements. And the second part is the dire financial situation of the Asheville City Schools per their financial statements. It looks like they're in a pretty precarious situation, and some of us who are watching this situation look at a potential merger of Asheville City and Buncombe County Schools. So has any of this information been tossed about in your work group as far as that dire financial situation and possible merger? And Buncombe County government would be the one to order that merger. And they do fund, they control all the funds for Asheville City and Buncombe County schools to a great degree. That's it.
We know that, again, I'm CC Weston. We do know that the county schools are very important, and this is why they're going to be getting a draft of the letter too as well. We have spoken with the attorneys, and for the most part, they've outlined our recommendations or suggested recommendations, and then we can go from there. So they did talk with us about the wording of it and all of that, and so this is what we've done based off of that.
I think it's important to know, as we maybe talked around this conversation, that there are legal ramifications, and we wrote these particular proposals in strategic ways. So there are proposals that we've written that don't ever name Black at all.
Good.
And then there's ways that there's the Black teacher recruitment and retention proposal. After much conversation with our community, it was pretty insistent and consistent that actually this is a reparations process for what happened to Black educators. and Black people in this community. I think that this commission does have a really interesting decision to make ahead of itself, to write things in a way in which we believe they may be passed, but we know that historically speaking, when things are washed down, they end up whitewashed and not serving our students. Or we can name what we are specifically asking for and give people the opportunity to show up for us to do that or not. Or we show up for ourselves to do that. We don't need people to show up for us to do that. I think what's also true is that there are different pockets of money and people in which we can go to serve. So while the entire compensation package to say that the government can give direct benefits just to Black people, we know is not legally sound in the state of North Carolina, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that can happen from a private entity. So this group looks to write recommendations to solve the problem at hand, to seek to amend the harm that actually happened, and then devise strategies to respond to the need rather than shifting our language before we even fully ask for what we are owed.
Dwight Mullen. I really want to commend you all for the hard work. It's very obvious you thought long and hard about these things. And your recommendation of using the Peak Academy as a model, I think is a sound thing, because I'm on the board there. The charter for the Peak Academy was approved by the Department of Public Instruction, and we require 50% of our staff and faculty to be people of color. And it was approved by them, and it stood for 2 years unchallenged. And another thing is that, in addition to the recommendations, have you all given thought about the implementation? I don't have trust of putting these recommendations in the hands of the very people who are responsible for the disparities.
So part of our recommendation is we discussed about the follow-through. So after the commission, the liability of who sees to make sure that the systemic and institutional harms and racism stop. And so essentially, we wanted to make sure that we get more community support to see ways in which the community thinks that we should address those issues. But we do have a list ourselves. Mr. McAfee, he asked that specific question at the last meeting about who is liable for making sure that happens, and making sure that it's a balance of not just the teachers, the staff, but also not just parents, but also the community as well. So it needs to be conjunction of all. So we discussed that, but we're also wanting to hear more input from our other commission members as well as the community about ideas that they have. But if you read the whole proposals and recommendations, we do have that information in there.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you to your group. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm happy with the multitude of recommendations that you have, and specifically the intentionality that you're taking in how to make these things happen, the language that you're using, who you're specifically addressing, all of these things. Please continue the work that you're doing. You seem like you're definitely on a good pathway forward that's going to bring forth some sort of change. And I just thank you for your hard work. I'm really impressed, and I want to come sit with your group and sit in one of your meetings.
So we are criminal justice. A couple of us are meeting at the next IFA. Health and wellness, we're going to reschedule soon, but essentially we'll be reaching out to all the IFAs because we're ready to talk and see how we can assist and come together with proposals and recommendations that you all have. So you all will hear from us within the next month.
Awesome. Thank you.
A question about the neighborhood schools.
Can't hear you.
I had a question about the neighborhood schools and what type of accountability on the communities themselves and the youth organizations that's designed to support youth. How are they being challenged, like you challenging the school system to provide some additional capacity and support that would give some more momentum to the youth and their parents in this current school climate, and how can we use existing development that's happening in and around these communities as educational opportunities. I'm seeing a lot of development, a lot of learning opportunities happen in and around these neighborhoods. And how can we tap into that as a way to train and to empower our communities, like they learning and rebuilding their neighborhoods at the same time in their own community? How are y'all addressing that?
Thank you. I'm Nurse Lavender. So this is a big part. I hear you saying a few things. One is about accountability and global accountability, not just to systems, but our community partners and to each other, right? We know that the education of youth starts in the home, it starts in utero, it starts in community. Children learn language in community. So we cannot wait until children arrive to school for them to be prepared by a system that we know has consistently failed them. There's something that needs to happen in our neighborhoods as well. And so that is something that we consider quite often and thoroughly. So something that we haven't put into this space, but we have talked about is like a creation of a hub. We've had robust conversations about them being placed within specific neighborhoods. Then a lot of conversation about push out, the real idea that Black people are really transient in this community from place to place because of the cost of living. And that there was a suggestion that maybe there's just a centralized location that holds resources, not just for education, but for everybody, that they come to know that this is the place that holds all the information, all the resources, that there would be community education from literacy to parenting strategies to home ownership and health benefits and resources of all the life, mental health, that it would all coexist together. I think that there has to be, we always are reminding ourselves of the presentations that we received that said that all of, I believe that there's a million great ideas, and if you don't have the right soil and you're not healed, you can't receive them. So I think that a part of our recommendations isn't just a great idea, but are we healing and pouring into people in order to receive them? So we talk a lot about that, and I think after we've gotten these ideas out on paper, we're thinking a lot more about accountability and about systems, about the who and the how. And that's part of why visiting the different IFAs are really important, to get the pulse on what other folks are doing. But you're absolutely spot on, and we'd love for you to join us in those conversations. If I answered the question.
Again, CC Weston, I do want to say something around that question too. We do have a few organizations that are actually Black owned and ran by Blacks who are actually trying to do what you say.
Like the Christine Avery Learning Center?
Like the Christine Avery Learning Center. But, and just kind of gleaning information from the organizations that are on the ground doing the work right now and pulling together to build the hub that we're talking about. And the accountability piece is to hold those persons accountable the same way we hold the school systems accountable. And so all of that too has been discussed, and we're looking at that and hoping to pull all of that together. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Another way of addressing, two other ways of addressing questions, because we're running short on time, is by writing your questions on the cards so that they can refer to them. And also, we'll have a roundtable as we end this meeting. So if something comes to mind that needs to be articulated, you'll have again another opportunity to speak to it. Thank you all. That was really, what's the
there's one thing that I want to make sure that we talk about today. You brought it up at the beginning of the meeting, and that is at Asheville School headquarters today, the new superintendent was introduced. And if he were looking out into the general audience, he could easily have the perception that there's not a lot of diversity in Asheville because we don't show up. I was disappointed that I had to leave there to get here on time, because as I listened to him speak, I wanted to have public comment. I believe that he said all of the right things initially coming in here to the new system, but I also believe we have a unique and wonderful opportunity to partnership with the new superintendent as we try to move things forward. We cannot keep doing the same things and asking for different results. I also go to the Buncombe County School Board meetings, and let me assure you, none of us are there. None of us are there. And we know some of those schools have absolutely no minority representation. And then we don't show up. Have a good day.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Y'all, Mr. Ray.
Let me just, Jesse Ray, let me just share one piece of information that the committee just discussed that's relevant to the commission, and that is House Bill 219 is already passed the House. It was sponsored by all Republicans. It's a harm that's currently going to be implemented because it will pass the Senate. House Bill 219 contains several items that will provide for additional public funding to charter schools. It includes a per student increase. Charter schools can get capital expenditures to build. They can also get grants. When the public system receives grants, they will be eligible to get some of that grant money. So that's a current harm that's in process and that will be implemented. We anticipate it will pass the Senate. So for your reference, it's House Bill 219, Omnibus Charter Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Seriously.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is something that I'm going to be sort of leading us through. It's a presentation, and as you can see on the agenda, we set aside about 25 minutes, and then we set aside another 20 minutes to discuss the retreat. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to do that and have enough time to get through both of those conversations. So if we could please pull up the data request, the update for the data request. What I'm going to do is sort of walk through where we're at in terms of the data requests, break it down per IFA, and we actually have a couple of staff members here tonight, really just phenomenal folks who have been working extremely hard on making sure that we do this research and find the information to make really well-informed recommendations. So we have Eric Jackson with the City of Asheville, we have Matt Baker with Buncombe County Government, and if there are questions, and others who are here, then I'm going to have them help respond to those questions. All right, so you have in your packet this snapshot of a dashboard that has been put together. So we have, and I'll just point out a few of the numbers. So the number of data requests that have been sent in and put in officially into our smart sheet is about 100. About 30 of them have been completed, and then about 68 of them are still incomplete. And that is for a number of reasons, and there are a number of different types of data requests. So if you look at the health and wellness requests by type, so for example, the orange is public data that's publicly available. That's about 44% of the requests that they have put in. About 44% of those requests that have been put in are research-based requests, and about 13% are sensitive data. So what I want to highlight here is that the different requests that have been submitted are different types. So some of them require extensive research, while other data requests are more easily accessible and publicly available that the city and county already have access to. So these other pie graphs also show you the breakdown per IFA. Criminal justice has about 62% of their requests are public data, whereas 15% are research requests, and then 23% is sensitive data. All right. So if you go to the next page, if you could scroll to the next slide here, I want to give you a snapshot of the completed request. So we know that overall, only about 33% of those data requests that have been submitted are complete at this time. And we know that over 60% still remain incomplete. However, what we would like to do and what we have done is when those requests are completed, we are providing that information, whether it's a PDF or an Excel file or a link to a website, we're providing that information back to the IFA facilitator so that they can use that data and implement it, and match it to their recommendation. So this is a snapshot of all of the requests that have been completed, and it's broken down per IFA. As you can see, a lot of the economic development requests have been completed at this time. I know that they have worked extensively with the economic development director for the city of Asheville to really get some of those, completed early on. Education requests that have been completed are listed here: health and wellness, housing, and criminal justice. Now this next page is a much longer list. So there are still quite a few requests that remain incomplete. And like I said, they are for various reasons, because some of them require more research and extensive research, and some of this information is not readily available. I'm actually going to call up some of our researchers to talk a little bit about what they've been doing, to make sure that they can get to that information as well. But I just wanted to kind of, I'm not going to read it word for word, but you can see here just the list of the type of data that has been submitted, or the request that has been submitted, that still is incomplete. Say, for example, in criminal justice, one example is arrest record by officer. That one was submitted recently. It remains incomplete. Employee wage data, it still remains incomplete. And so you all can read this list. The last thing that I'll point out before I pause is the next list. So this list here is actually a list of data requests that have been prioritized, because we've been working closely with the IFA facilitators, and we've been working with y'all, and you have asked, multiple times, what's going on, what's the status of this data request. And so these have been prioritized, and we're working within our processes to make sure that these are the ones that we are identifying and making sure we're prioritizing to get answered. That includes city county equity policies, data regarding a recent remembrance project. A lot of the health and wellness requests also have been prioritized, and a lot of these are research requests as well. So you'll see a lot of that. The ones that they could be harder to really pin down, could be based in outside research, which is outside of city or county, but through their, doing a deep dive, they'll be able to provide that information. So, are there any questions at this time?
Where's the data for the economic development? I'm on that, and I don't remember. Where is this data located?
That's a good question. So, Mr. Barton asked, where is the data located, the completed data requests?
Yeah, the ones that you say is completed on it.
So those have been sent to the IFA facilitators, and they're also in a dashboard. They're available digitally. So we can make that information available, and we can send that out to each commission member as well as they're completed.
Okay, cool. As far as the data, so sometimes I know the data is trying to search for the historical harm, but we've signed a paper saying that there's harm, continual harm that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to see how we could break up, we have focus area for the historical harm, a focus area for the existing harm and landscape opportunities and threats, and then Third, the sustainability of reparations and the momentum to sustain it, to create some generational wealth. We have enough talent in this room to break up this, and it's like we all focusing on the harms and the history, but there's some right now opportunities that's happening that we should also be taking advantage of.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
That's not a question, that's a statement.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're right. Oh, I'm sorry.
An example would be like they want to do some work on the cemeteries, the black cemeteries. The Land and Sky want to go out there grant for $500,000 to take care of black cemeteries. That's an opportunity that I think we should be connected with. I mean, the county just got some money to do some youth violence prevention thing. That's money on the table. The I-26 project, that's money on the table. The community center, revitalizing and renovating community centers, that's an opportunity that can go through education and economic development. But I don't see the overarching umbrella that's connecting all these dots to give momentum to this process, and this process giving momentum to those existing opportunities and whatever threats that's out there.
Retreat topic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good topic to discuss, discuss further within your IFA and discuss it with your fellow commission members as well. Go ahead.
Just an observation on the education and the items that are not complete. I mean, the first 6 items there, in my opinion, that information should already be available. I mean, what's difficult? They've got that. They know the students enrolled by race, teachers race, staff by race, standardized scores by race. I mean, so this is just an observation. I don't understand what's so difficult about getting some of this data.
Thank you for pointing that out. I would like to invite some of my colleagues up here just to talk about, what that process is like and getting access to that information. And then can you speak to that specific one?
So really quickly, just to kind of go off what Bart was saying, there are 2 tracks here. There's historical data, and then there's more recent data. And when we're looking at data that has been digitized, that only goes back so far. And we can only go back so far, even things that are, even documents that have been digitized. There's digitized, and then there's what we call machine readable digitized. When it's that level, we can get it data pretty quick. But when it's not, it takes a lot more time and research, because the truth of the matter is that neither Buncombe County nor the city of Asheville own that data. That is owned by the state of North Carolina. And so we have to go get permission to use it. And that takes a lot of conversations, and it takes time to hunt it down and source it. And when we do source it, a lot of times we have to go back and manually tabulate this data. Step on camera here's foot here. So, and I didn't introduce myself. I'm Matt Baker. I'm with Buncombe County Strategy and Innovation. I apologize. And
Hi, I'm Catherine Cutshall. I am the collections manager for the Buncombe County Special Collections, so the history department of library services. And I have recently come onto this project and have helped with some of the historic data requests. And like Matt was saying, a lot of this information is out there. And I'm noticing just on this list that some of these that are marked incomplete are in process. We are working on them actively. One of the things that my team and I have been able to accomplish is to go ahead and pull a lot of the early education data from the biennial state superintendent's reports, and that has been a matter of pulling that volume off of the shelf, finding that table in the old book, and then manually copying all of that into an Excel spreadsheet. So right now we have finished 1888 to 1960, and we're working on filling in the gap between what is available instantaneously at the touch of a button and what we have here. So some of that might take trips to the state archives. There are some other requests here that my team and I are trying to exactly figure out how we're going to aggregate the data. The data is available, it's just a matter of figuring out how to present it in a way that is useful to you all. So for instance, one of the requests from the Housing IFA is about Black home ownership and real estate values. The United States Census lists all that information. However, it's not available for us to just type it in and then pull it out. So what my team and I are going to have to do for that particular request is sit with a copy of the census, the original census documents, and go line by line, identifying Black folks if they have or if they own their own home, and that is indicated on the census, and the real estate value is indicated on the census. So this data, it does exist, it's just taking us a long time to get there, and thankfully, Buncombe County Commissioners voted a couple of months ago to provide a temporary full-time position in my department, allowing me and my staff a little bit more breathing room to work on these types of requests. We're reference librarians and we do reference requests all day long, but some of these are a lot bigger than what we normally work on. So,
Mr. Richardson?
Thank you for what you were just explaining to us. So given the limitations and challenges that you have, that still leaves us with you guys as our go-to for the things that we need. Having said that, I still kind of am listening for the answer to what the timelines are and where the expectations can lie. I get that you have challenges and we respect that. But like everything else with challenges, you got to find a way to get to the bottom of what you need. And so Mr. Baker gave us a list of the things that we're challenged to come up with, and we're challenging you guys to get that data for us.
I can offer on time when the person needs things.
And so my question is,
Sure.
is all those things, obstacles that have been listed, what kind of timelines can we have expectations to? Because we don't know the time limit that we're going to be given.
Sure.
And so it's hard for us to accept your limitations given ours.
So on my end, I have a new full-time staff person starting next Monday, and we've already been able to leverage library substitute employees that we rely on pretty regularly to do some of this data entry work. Some of these other questions will have to be answered by folks who have a historical background, but I estimated that once we get our new employee onboarded, for an example, the census question, the Black homeownership rates, that it'll probably take me and my staff about a month to go through each one of those censuses. So 1870 to 1950, that's what's historically available to make those identifications and put that data together. But Matt.
I'm going to be a little more cagey, but there's a reason for it. So after some conversations with the IFAs, with the data side of the house, Catherine with the history side of the house, she's going in a lot of these deep archives and finding information, manually transcribing it. On the data side of the house, what we're doing is we're going into the IFA meetings, and I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but we're asking what the priorities are. And we've heard things like, hey, you know, everything from urban renewal forward was what we heard in economic development, for instance. And so we're focusing our efforts on prioritizing what's most important for you folks to come to your recommendations, because we know that if we try to just exhaust everything, it might not be in the order that you need it, and it might not be the time frame that you need it in. So what we're focused on is, rather than saying you can all have everything done by X date, it is what do you need, what is most important for you now, so we can get that to you first, and the rest of the stuff can come. So you're going to do it, but we want to get you what you need most first.
Well, can we establish a urgency and a ultimatum? In other words, can we do both? Can we have, okay, yes, we need these things in a priority sense, we need these now, but we need the others also by, so that it just still doesn't just kind of linger in the ether that there is no established timeline for completion.
So in our process, we have set up a database. Whenever these requests have been inputted, there is a priority level that can be set. It goes from low to critical. And there's also a date needed by that can be set by whoever is inputting that data. Those dates can be put in there, but I would also add that data is a conversation. We may complete an item, provide it to you, and someone may look at it and go, that's exactly what I want. But more often than not, it's going to be that it raises more questions, that you want to ask questions in a different way. When you come back with this, thank you for that, can I have X, Y, and Z now? So then that's going to be marked as incomplete again, so we can go back to the well and get more data for you. So it's hard for me to put an end date on it, but there's an option for folks, the IFA facilitators, for instance, to go in and add those date needed by, and to prioritize these things from low to critical, low to medium, high critical, actually. So yes, there is a mechanism in place to have those things raised to our attention. And it's one of those things that needs to be done. If folks have certain priorities to be set, speak with your facilitator, and they can make sure they get into the system to get that done, so we can work on those things first.
The question that Mr. Richardson raised was very important, the question of, what is the hard timetable of completing all the requests? Because if there is no hard timetable, we have a hard timetable. And if our timetable does not match up when all the requests are completed, then we might need to think about, if we can't get the data that we need to complete this work, then maybe we need to extend that time period. Obviously, we can appreciate having priority lists, but if we get things, and like you just mentioned, you might get a set of data or requests that you change your conversation and focus based on what you see in front of you that may lead to a better outcome for the Black community. But because you don't get it until February of next year, and we're finishing in April, it doesn't make sense. So maybe we might need to start thinking about extending this time period. If we don't have hard timetables for data, how can we have hard timetables for completion?
Can I speak to that just really quickly? I just want to speak to the sort of timetable aspect of it. I think that what is really helpful is when we have recommendations that are in draft form, they're somewhat formed, they've been well thought out, so that we can then fill in the gaps with the data that is needed to match that recommendation, instead of pulling the recommendation out of the data. Because the data is you all's lived experiences of being, living here in Asheville and Buncombe County. So thinking about the priorities in your IFAs, developing those recommendations, and then we can find the data to complete your recommendations. And I have to play bad guy here, but we also are suggesting to put a hold on new requests so that we can complete all of the requests that we have here, right? Yeah. So starting on June 15th, we are putting a hold on new requests coming from IFAs. So between now and that time, you're going to want to go ahead and get those requests in that are going to be really specific to the recommendations that you're working on. MZ?
The resolution lays out a lot of statements made by the city and the county. What database has information justifying each of these statements made? Black people have been systematically excluded from historic and present private economic development and community investments. Black people have been segregated from mainstream education and within present-day school programs. Black students have experienced the denial of education through admission. There's all these statements. Where's the database justifying all these statements? Because it's not the job of the commission to justify the resolution that's been made. So I think in terms of prioritization, I think that's the first priority before we even stepped in the room. Gathering all the data to justify these statements, powerful statements, and I would say more than likely true statements. But where's the database? Where's the information to support that?
It's a tall task, and that database doesn't exist in a tangible way. That's what we're working towards putting together.
And I'll just add on to that, and I think that's a really great point, and that's been part of my struggle coming into this project and trying to think about how, as a historian, I can help provide hard data, right? Because so much of this is not hard data. It's lived experience, and our understanding of it through time has come through scholarly research, right? So one of the things that I'm hoping to do is to meet with some of the IFAs, and one of the things that might come out of this as a data request is really not so much hard numbers on a spreadsheet, but a bibliography of resources that all sort of point back to here's exactly how Black people have been harmed in Asheville and Buncombe County, and be able to sort of use that as additional supporting evidence to go along with these hard number requests.
MZ, the data that those resolutions were based on is primarily rooted in reports done by student researchers at State of Black Asheville.
Yes, those.
I'm sorry, I don't want to speak.
I'm sorry.
Please.
No, just briefly, the lived experience and the data. One of the starting points is our recommendations. There is also on the Excel spreadsheet a section where we put down what data was derived to make that recommendation. And that should be let me just say this. When you're getting organized to try to substantiate whatever recommendations you're making, there is always a place for that data source to be listed. And there needs to be a policy and procedure put in place to where when we're working, we actually are working in the IFAs to do exactly that. Not just make the recommendation, but also to substantiate it with data. Sometimes we veer off a little bit. The other thing that I'd also like to ask for is that these completed items that we have here, they not only need to be pushed through to IFA facilitators, but those of us who will put on these IFA groups, because we do have certain expertise and everybody has so much of it. So it would be helpful if we could get our eyes on these completed ones per each IFA group that we have. Because most of us, and I serve on 3 of them, have received very little data unless we went somewhere and retrieved it ourselves. So I think that's important to do. Thank you.
I have good news on that front. The dashboard that Christine's been talking about has a link to every completed data project, the attached spreadsheet if there is one, the attached URL if there is one, and everyone who sits in this room has, well, everyone at these tables has access to that as of this morning.
That's good.
So that link will be distributed to you folks at our earliest opportunity, and you'll be able to look at that stuff, and it will update every 2 minutes in real time. So as things are completed, you'll be able to see those, and hopefully we see that count go down.
Christine, quick question. Oh,
go ahead, son.
It's in, basically, is there other archive mechanisms in place? Because we've heard multiple times that this information is not available, or it's here or it's here. As we're compiling this data, I think it's very important that archive structures are set so that, one, if we need to find it in the future or 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's available, and then also will it be public as well?
That's a great point. I think Catherine can speak to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So every one of these requests that me and my team have worked on so far, they automatically get archived. That's what we're in the business of doing. And so what I'm hoping is long-term having more conversations with you all and really making sure that this entire process is represented in the Buncombe County Special Collections, which is a publicly accessible archive for everyone in our community and folks outside of our community. So as I'm doing this work, as my team is doing this work, and I'm sure I'll go back at the end and pull a lot of this hard data, but we will aggregate all of that together and make sure that that's something that people 150, 250 years from now are going to be able to look back at your work and understand it.
Just.
I think we can help in reference, and I'm just speaking for myself, and this is my observation and not speaking for the Education Committee. But I think we can give you some guidelines in terms of the information we need. I mean, we don't need to go back to 1863 to identify the harms. And so the research education back to 1863, to me, is not necessary. You can start at a much later time. Now, I started school in the Asheville Public Schools in 1956. Segregated schools, elementary, middle school, high school. So we know that's when the harm started, and they've continued up till today. And so I think the IFAs can give you some guidelines if they think about the period that they need that will justify either the harms or the particular data that they need that will help you and decrease some of your time if you're going back so far. I mean, we don't need to go back to 1863.
I 100% agree with that, and I look forward to coming to the Education IFA. Captain and I have been to a few of those, and they've been very helpful in helping to guide our data collection processes. I mentioned earlier, had a conversation with Mr. Parker here at Economic Development IFA, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, we know what happened way back in the day, but we want to talk about everything from urban renewal forward. That helped focus our efforts. It's not that we're not providing the stuff that from 1900 forward. If we can get it, we're going to get it. But we're prioritizing the newer things first. So that helps us get things moving faster. And so, yes, we're coming around to these different IFA meetings to have those conversations with you folks as fast as we can.
Let me push back on this a little bit. Our resolution does in fact take us back to enslavement.
Yeah.
Right. So the data needed to offer reparations for the historical eras are just as important as what we are doing to address the present.
And we're dedicated to fulfilling those, or prioritizing these according to the IFA's directions.
Dr. Mason?
I hear you say repeatedly prioritizing, and I respect that, because you have to start somewhere and have to create the urgency to some degree where you see it and in conjunction with where we see it. But it does have to be a comprehensive view. Probably it's an apple that we may only get one bite at. So if we don't get the right bite, we might leave a lot of things on the table. And so respectfully, the harms began before 1863. So how do we decide that we don't care about what happened to it? At what point do we cut off our care and concern for our ancestors? And so I realize that maybe your office is challenged by this level of work, and so that could be a problem here. And so maybe it comes down to, do we have enough eyes, hands, brains on the challenge that's ahead of us from your perspective?
I would not turn down more help, that's for sure.
If there's a way for us to get it to you, let's figure out how we do that.
But what I would add is that we have a very limited view into what this body is looking for. And so, for instance, we get requests in. I have not seen many requests. In fact, I've seen specific dates on requests, 1900 to 2022. It's not asking for anything before that. So if we're supposed to be looking for before that, that's something that we need to be made aware of. In some cases, they're not. They're just all the way back as far as we can go. Fine, we'll do that. But in some cases, there are actual specific allotments of years we're being asked to produce. So if there's guidance that the full body can provide us to help our efforts, we'll accept that too.
We'll challenge.
Dr. Macon?
I'm a little concerned about this temporary hold-on request starting June 15th, and I think I heard you say that, I know both of you have said, I think about meeting with IFAs, and some of you have done some of that initial work, and so wondering how that timeline of when you all will get around to all the IFAs, will that be before June 15th, and does that give us time to really have those conversations to nuance and have our full data request submitted?
The only thing that I can say to speak to that is that I've been making my way into making sure that I'm getting to these IFA meetings. I'm meeting with education next week on the 23rd, and then housing after that on the 3rd, I believe. And I'm going to, and those two I reached out to specifically. You can see on your pie charts here that housing and education are the bulk of the big research questions, historical kinds of research questions where there's going to be quite a bit of legwork. But I agree, and I'm going to do my very best to get around to everybody, or at least to have a conversation with the IFA facilitator, because a lot of these requests as well, Matt said that they're huge, right? 1900 to 2022, and probably a little bit before that. So with that one particular education request, 1900 to 2022, we actually have the data going back to 1883, so we just went ahead and provided that since it was readily available. But there are also some requests that are really large, and with a conversation with the IFA could be whittled down into something that makes a little more sense, or is easier to pull the data, or to have something concrete to pass off to you all.
Thank you. And I would note that health and wellness has 44% research requests, so we're up there too. Thank you.
I've been speaking to Ginger a little bit about that.
Okay.
Yes, we'll be trying to get to all of those meetings before June 15th.
MZ, just a quick question, please. When might the hold be lifted?
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Why is there a hold?
I'm sorry.
I don't fully understand why there's a hold.
Oh, sorry. So that the research team can get to all of the incomplete requests in a timely manner. Specifically the research parts.
So this is,
Go, please.
so this is lack of capacity? If we don't have staff capacity, can we add staff?
Do we want to make a question before?
We are adding staff right now. We just recently added a new librarian that starts on May 22nd.
Are we adding enough staff to address the capacity?
Put things on hold.
I'm sorry.
We're putting things on hold. I think that answers the question.
When you all get done shooting off our kneecaps, I'd like mine back.
I don't know if you're getting what's going on here, is that the commission has committed itself to database analyses for the recommendations. And so the data that we need, we're requesting, not frivolously, we're doing it in order to make sure that the recommendations we forward to the city and to the county will have a database response in their policy. For example, the work you're doing with the Census Bureau. Before I retired, we found it necessary to go to Charlotte, and the Charlotte office was very helpful with the U.S. Census Bureau in doing that, but that was before Trump, so I don't know what he's done. So. But anyway, my point being is that these questions are not just being hostile, they're actually getting at the root of what we're trying to achieve by a certain time.
I'm really hopeful that once we get this new employee started in special collections, that we're going to be really able to build out capacity. I'm very excited. She's somebody who's been working in local history for about 10 years, and she's able to hit the ground running. So I'm looking forward to seeing how our capacity can grow, and perhaps it looks like we can lift this whole one request and just
It also appears that this is going to be a primary topic at a retreat.
Right.
That we can discuss further, so you all certainly invited.
Other questions? You want to move to the next item, Dr. Mullen? All right,
And I
thank you all.
believe it is the retreat. Christine, can you take us through the discussion of the retreat so far?
Oh, I'm going to do it from my seat.
Oh,
All right, so we're not great on here.
but this is sort of a round table.
Yeah. Thank y'all for bearing with us a bit on some of these process-oriented topics. I know it's not ideal to have process stuff at the full commission meetings, but we have to get through it, so I appreciate you. So we're gonna move to the survey results from the retreat. I appreciate everyone that took the time to complete that. I wanna say we had about 16 total responses, and there were only 3 questions. 3 questions. The first question was select your top preferences for date and time for the in-person retreat. And I encouraged you all to select your top 2 options. And a lot of folks, as you can see, have selected other.
Yes.
And have let us know that the times that we suggested are not ideal times. What am I looking at here? Uh-oh. Oh, I feel like I'm missing something here. Oh,
Ms. Edwards?
yes.
Bernard Oliphant. I don't know if there will ever be a perfect time for all of us.
Okay.
And we just got to do it.
Okay. I hear you. The idea, just really quickly, and we'll make sure we get to y'all's questions. So that was the question about date and time, and we know that's going to be hard for everyone. It would be ideal if we could get as many people as possible, and the idea that we had as we were planning with staff was that we could use this facility and use the time that we have our normal commission meeting and extend that time so we can get at least 6 hours together. And I know that it's going to be hard during the day for folks who are working, and I know it's going to be hard for folks on the weekend who are traveling, so we're trying to be mindful of that too. And so I'm looking at your comments. I'm not available for any of these days. Making sure that the retreat is after graduations. One thing I will say is we want to do it quickly. We want to make sure that it's a priority, and this is something that we do. And then some people have suggested a Saturday. So we can probably go back and look at that. Let me get through these other points, and then I'll open it up for discussion. The second question was, I'm sorry, I did it in the wrong order. The second question that we're looking at is, which of the following is the most important objective for the in-person retreat? Obviously, we want to hit on all of these objectives, but if you look at the list, the average response that's closest to one being most important, is being able to view all of the recommendations in one place. A lot of people said that that is going to be the most important thing. Discuss how those recommendations connect and intersect with each other. Having a time to discuss and define reparations for Asheville and Buncombe County is next. Next is being able to make comments and suggestions on those recommendations. Then prioritizing the recommendations based on short, medium, and long term. Having a dedicated time to refine those recommendations within your work group, and then categorizing them based off of CRC resource allocation versus third-party or outside resource allocation. And then a couple of other items that were not listed include the creation of an IFA comprised of at least one representative to talk about the issues facing the commission. And then this last one is developing an independent assessment committee, community run. And then a couple of the suggestions that had not been mentioned, would like for this to be a work session, time to get to know one another, how will the city and county address the vice chair. So there have been a few things that have been added that we hadn't considered, so we want to make sure that the retreat is a time to do that. So I don't know if you want to sort of facilitate and hear questions for folks, or how do you want to receive their feedback?
It seems to me that some other things may have come up during our discussion this evening that might be considered as part of the retreat. I guess now would be a time to bring those things up. But and if we could also combine it with a roundtable as we hit all the commissioners. Some of you have not spoken tonight, and I need to hear all your voices. So if we could combine your input on the retreat with general comments that you might have been holding back on as we work around the table. We're at 7:45. We have 15 minutes. Mr. Barton, would you start us off?
Yeah, I didn't hear.
Can you speak a little louder? I'm asking for input on the retreat. Any insights on the retreat, or if you have any insights that you would like to contribute to tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I said it earlier. It's like, what's the umbrella mechanism that's going to give momentum to the efforts to restore our communities? The reparations is the big thing. How is it feeding the rest of these organizations, communities that's been trying to do this when they didn't have a reparations in the sky proposal? It's like, how do we do it? And how do we organize the talent in the room to share and connect the talent in the room to give momentum to this process so that it can be sustained over time? And I'm seeing threats and opportunities right now that we don't discuss that I think is crucial, especially if we want to get other people's attention on this process. Because if they see the same old thing happening in their communities and then we talking about reparations to stop it and it's not happening, it's a great disconnect.
I hope I understand your question.
I'm asking for input on the retreat, any ideas regarding the time of
Okay.
the subject matter of the retreat, or
Okay.
if you have other comments about what's happened tonight.
No, I'll stick to that comment, okay. I think the retreat is very important for all of us to get together to realize the type of reparations we really want and make sure that we can continue, no matter what happened, that we have the will to do what we have to do. It's very important because there are a lot of obstacles out there, and there's some people that will not want us to succeed in what we're going to do. But we need to have that determination and know exactly what we need to do.
I think the retreat is necessary to try to bring the items that we've mentioned and the challenges that we have, to try to bring them together as best as we can.
I think to Mr. Barton's point, we need a time when we can all meet together and see how all of our IFAs intersect with each other. And that's what I see the retreat as being capable of.
And if y'all have any thoughts or comments on dates and times, that will help us as well with the planning too. So let us know what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Weekends work best for me.
Okay.
I feel that weekends will work best. Maybe a 4-hour time frame, because I'm not quite sure a 6-hour time frame will be necessary. Once you go too long, you lose the interest of the people. So most definitely a 4-hour time frame, possibly on the weekend. And I think it needs to be twofold. We need to look at what Dwayne Barton is saying as far as what can we implement now, and then what recommendations do we have for long term. And so those two things need to be hashed out.
Thank you.
I do think a retreat is really necessary, and it sounds like what we talked about tonight is a perfect example of why we need a retreat, to go through everything and to talk about what data is, what additional data may be needed, or to figure all that out. Because once we all get together and start looking at the recommendations, like that's what Mr. Young said, more things may come up. So we need to get our items in before this June, I guess, 15th date. So I think it is very important and very necessary. And I also want to add that at the economic development meeting, when the folks that were up there talking came and spoke to us, that they did bring us data starting with the 1800s. And we did say to continue doing the research, but I said I would like to have data starting with urban renewal, because the information goes more in line with what we are recommending now. And when we started this process, we had to have data to make our recommendations. So it just kind of feels like a little bit tonight that things are still a little unclear. Lived experiences are now like being talked about, where we have that in this room. I mean, that could be taken at any time or any meeting, if that's part of the data that can be added to our recommendations. So, and if I'm off, someone please help me or say something about that. But I just wanted to make that clear, that was to keep going with the 1800s, but let's start with urban renewal to support what we have put together, so we can, when it's time to make our recommendation, we have the data to go with that.
Right.
For immediate or, yeah.
Yes. So I will speak to that really quickly. So when I comment about lived experiences or having an idea about a recommendation that you want to see passed, let's say, for example, it is related to education and related to reading levels. And so you might have a family member who has lower reading levels, or like you have experience with that. And so one of your recommendations is to create a reading group, reading circle within the library system, right? And so that is your lived experience. And now you want to know, okay, because African American children have lower reading levels to this percentage, so then that's why we're recommending this. So all we have to find, or all the county has to find, is that percentage. They don't have to find all reading levels for the past 100 years. They have to just say, okay, this percent is what's impacting African. I don't want to reduce it to that, but I really want these data requests to be specific, so that the staff will be able to know specifically what they're looking for.
I'm glad you said that, because that goes along with us asking for data from urban renewal through now, because there is still being harm done today with the children of color in our system. So yes, the lived experience does tie to all that, and I think that has played in all of our recommendations.
Thank you.
I just think that a retreat would be a good time for everyone to come together, the IFAs, to bridge the gap where there seems to be some disconnects that I'm hearing tonight. This is my first night coming to a meeting, but based on what I'm hearing, it seems like there's some disconnects, and maybe the retreat would just be a great time to bridge those gaps and come together.
Thank you for being here.
Please. I'm sorry, I'm taking notes.
She knows her.
Bill Burnett Carson, and I agree with Mr. Martin. There is still continued harm in our communities. I'm dealing with it every day. Our children can't go to school without worrying about being run over. And we have asked numerous times for some traffic calming measures, and we were told it would be 5 years or longer. That's not acceptable. And it would not occur in any other white neighborhood. So there are some things we are still experiencing, we will always experience, until we stand up and stop accepting what people want to hand us. And as far as the retreat, I look forward to it. The weekend would work better for me, but I will adjust my schedule to accommodate the need of others.
Thank you.
She didn't want to
That's
talk.
That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna work on it. I'm really excited about the retreat. I think that it'll give us all an opportunity to be in the same room together, and that I would hope that when we come together, we won't overtalk each other, that we will respect each other's time, and that we would see all the pieces that I've heard tonight have been very important for everyone as we pull this together. But I would like to say that really I want to concentrate, I'm like Mildred with education. My concern are with our children and our smaller children. And I'm thinking that I heard about the charter schools, but everybody won't be able to go to a charter school. So if we're going to talk about bringing schools back into the community and having teachers that look like them, we need to find a way that we can get more accessibility. And if it was public, even if we were to get our centers back, and that would involve the public school system coming in, and kids would still be inside the community. So I would hope that we would think on that area, because I have no problem with charter schools for all kids. You got a lot of kids, and they all won't be able to go to charter school. So what's going to happen to the ones left behind that are not? So I hope that we continue to look at that, and even with health and wellness, the doula program. There's a whole organization with a lot of people may not know about black females in Asheville that are working really hard with the doula program to address the mortality rate. So I think that if we all come together and we come with all these things that we know, and we just sit down, and maybe if each IFA would sit down with whatever they would like to talk about, and so we won't be just going all over the place, and have it organized, whether we do 4 hours or not,
Saturday, whatever day is fine with me, but if we have it structured where that no one is just out of line and we just don't go all over the place and we can just get it done. I think the retreat is long overdue. I thought the retreat should have happened when we first met, and the story of why we are here needed to be told. I'm also concerned about the 5 legacy communities that we speak highly of, but who are they? What are they doing? And as we meet, communities are meeting, doing 20, 25, 35, 45 plans, and I'm not sure that this group is in sync with those community groups that are putting together and asking for things in their community. I think it's very important that all 5 legacy communities be represented, and especially those that are working on their 2025 or 2035 plans.
Thank you. Mr.
Everybody's already talking, Bernard Oliphant, already talking about the retreat, so I'll skip that. Small things are separating us sometimes. The first slide we saw tonight had the Vance Monument on it. This city has already said it goes, so it should not be on one of our slides, especially the first slide.
Dwayne Richardson, I will be available and looking forward to the retreat, and I think there are great things that we can accomplish when the retreat comes about.
Thank you.
Dwayne McAfee, a little irritated about the process. We've already voted to have the retreat. I don't understand now why we have to pull the committee about how we feel about having the retreat. I find this redundant and quite frankly unnecessary. We're going to have the retreat. I don't care how everybody feels about the retreat. Let's get together and talk.
We got to do it.
Actually, we're asking for specific inputs at the retreat that were not listed in the survey that you could contribute now.
Yeah,
and the second point
we need
is,
to be more focused, and we need to have an actual target as to what exactly we are trying to do as a committee. And I want to wait for the retreat so that I can say some of the stuff I've been holding back. So I look forward to the retreat.
Thomas Priestler, just everything tonight I think definitely aligns along with the need for the retreat. As far as what can we do right now without having to wait on like data, and I know we said everything evolves around data, but to me sometimes data is almost kind of like prove that you're right about being wrong. So with that said, I think the retreat can address a lot of our concerns and definitely make that connection and seeing what the next steps, like even for our leadership, while we're doing this work, what can they do? Like in some cases, like Brown versus Board, we all know like it could be a case that's kind of like altering the policies for a fair education, and folks are sitting on this information and they can do some work as well. Like we're not the only ones who want the reparation. It just seems that way. But it's others in leadership that can do something if you just make a phone call or they make the letter, So I guess I'll save some of that also for the retreat. But
Appreciate it.
Definitely looking forward to it.
I won't talk about the retreat. Set a date, I just said it, set a date, have it, and the coalition of the willing will show up.
That's right.
Other than that, I would say try to have a common understanding of the difference between equity and reparations. There are differences. Some of the things I hear talked about around the table is actually equity and not reparations. That's it.
I'm Dee Williams, and basically, I know there's a philosophy that goes with reparations and everything else in the world, but I'm more of a tactician. If it doesn't have a proposal and a budget, it doesn't exist. And that's the way the world works. And so hopefully when we have this retreat, some of the recommendations that some of us have made on some of those Excel spreadsheets also carry a program with them and a price tag. And we can go from there. Anytime you have elected officials who tell you that they don't think what you're doing, you're producing anything because they don't see a program and they don't see a budget, that's worrisome. When we've got communities like Burton Street and the others who've been putting plans together for 10 or 12 years without anybody providing the resources or the technical competency that they need to do what they need, and then we sit here and prognosticate. That is absolutely frustrating. So I would urge you to set immediate, short-term, and long-term goals. We have not the precedent, but the worksheet. We have an Excel worksheet that asks where we got data from. Data wasn't created just because city and county staff came up here today. There have been data sets, i.e. the State of Black Asheville and the U.S. Census Bureau and the Racial Equity Report Card. We don't need to wait on that. We predicated where we are here today based on data that already exists and was good enough then, and all we should probably need is an update of that or going back a reasonable time. My whole thing is, you get tired of hearing people talk. I know I do. I get tired of hearing the philosophy behind it. And, the only thing that matters in this world is that people are suffering because they don't have any resources. And when we come in this room, unless we leave with a program, a proposal, and a budget, we haven't done one thing but aggravate the situation as far as I'm concerned. It's very frustrating to keep interest of people and credibility when you don't produce a tangible product. And I know it takes time, but it's time to produce something tangible, and that's all I have to say. I'll come to the retreat, but I'm not going to promise I'm going to stay. If it doesn't look like it's going to produce anything, I'm going to excuse myself in a very civil fashion. We're glad you stayed tonight.
I kind of agree with Dee. I don't say much, but I am particular about results. I'm willing to put the work in. I just want to see results. It's a lot of people depending on us, and there's a lot of people talking about this. So I just hope we can just get down to the bottom of it and just get some results instead of just wasting time and money.
Thank you.
Sandu McPeters. I think realistically, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about at the retreat, but time-wise, we're not going to be able to accomplish every single thing that's on this list or the ideas that we share. So I think that for me, I agree with what Brother Keith said, is that I think it's important that we're on the same line as far as what reparations means and what we're trying to accomplish. I think that me personally, our plan of visiting different IFAs will create a culture to share those ideas together. I don't know if a retreat, this first retreat, is the best idea essentially for that. Maybe we have a second retreat and we can do that. But I think that we've heard multiple people say that we want results. There's things happening. There's harms that are happening. I think that we need to learn what reparations, what equity is, and essentially what we can do now to essentially start to address some of these, and also how we can go into the communities and gain support. Those are the three things I think that are essentially important, and I think maybe we discuss maybe after the summer having another retreat that talks about how we as IFAs can come together to work on our recommendations. But just being realistic, I don't think that 4 hours is enough to accomplish every single thing that people have shared this time.
Priorities, I see them as developing an independent assessment committee, implementation committee. I see them as discussing what reparations actually is versus just community reform. And then I see them as talking over the specific recommendations that each of the IFAs have already developed, and even to kind of brainstorm about what's coming down the pipeline. Time is not on our side, and each of these meetings are really important for us moving this thing forward. So I want to use this retreat to really meet some marks, set some goals and meet them, because time is running short. Thank you.
Some of the things I've written down that reiterate what some of you all have said, I wrote, how are our recommendations actually reparations and not simply best practice or equity work? And also the idea of fleshing out a few recommendations together to give input on how are we justifying recommendations, how are we developing them? And one of the things that came up tonight, I think, was what will be sufficient justification for our proposals? Is it simply naming current inequities? And if so, then we may not need a lot of the data requests, but I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's going to be sufficient. And so that's why we need some of this historical data to go beyond naming current inequities. Because frankly, the city and county government aren't responsible for every part of every inequity. There are a lot of systems at play, and so we have to make more direct connections between what government has done, what other entities like school boards can do, and be more specific and concrete in our recommendations. Thank you.
Doctor, are those available?
Yes.
Thank you. We've gone 8 minutes past our adjournment time. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Thank you.